you're going to write 3 questions for the lesson that you're planning on teaching. But I want to show you what I did with the bunny hop lesson that we've done. So the bunny hop lesson to review is, and for those of you that maybe didn't do this packet, it's about Ricky the rabbit who's making some jumps on a number line, and each time he takes a jump, he jumps 10 units. So the children are actually composing function machines about what happens when, if he starts on 7, he goes to the 10. So the first thing that I brought in to differentiate it, to take it a little further, is I brought in a hundreds chart, because this is a manipulative that we use in our classroom to help us count on and work with numbers. So my questions are focused on the hundreds charts, and if you were the students in my classroom, you would all have a hundreds chart. So I want you to think about what you need to bring into your lesson that provides access for problem solving to differentiate it. So here's the sample of the form that I worked through creating the questions for Ricky the rabbit. So I went into the lesson plan and I went right to the just right question, which, if you refer back to that Bloom's taxonomy, was the understand, the apply, and the analyze. So this was the question I was posing or going to pose to my classroom, where I felt like it's out there for most of my class to engage in. So the question was, Ricky Rabbit jumps 10 units each time he jumps, and let's look and count on our hundreds board. So first jump, so we'd model, was from 12 to 22. Another jump was from 15 to 25. And another jump was, he starts at 23 and then he lands at 33. So that's my review for the children. And then the questions I would pose is what happens to the digits in the tens place each time he makes a jump. So then at their table, the kids would be exploring that on the number, either with a hundreds chart or a piece of scratch paper. So that was my question I felt got at reviewing if students understand, if they can apply their understandings, and giving some analyzing the information that they collect. So then I went back and I thought, in order to access this, what am I hoping or counting on kids bringing to the table? What's the prior knowledge I want to access? So I went back and I restated that Ricky the rabbit jumps 10 times, because that is fundamental in understanding this. And if he started on 15 and he jumped forward, the question is, will he land on a bigger or a smaller number? And how do you know? And what's important about the how you know, and then you can see it's pretty much the same question, but we're going backwards, is I've taken a remembering or a recall question. Will the number get bigger or smaller? And how have I provided some depth to that question? What did I do that gave it a little deeper, or maybe related to the math practices? So think about that for a minute, and Rose has the microphone. What did I just do to a recall question in both of those instances that allowed every student the opportunity to justify their thinking and their reasoning? So put your finger on your chest, or turn and talk to a partner in a minute. Take a little private think time.
You went back to prior knowledge.
I went back to the prior knowledge, which was accounting on, but what did I do to this question to deepen it? I think she wanted to talk, Rose. She was dying to talk, yeah. Thank you for volunteering.
You asked them, how do you know?
That's exactly right. I added the how do you know, because if I would have stopped there, I would have possibly just gotten a one-word response. It gets bigger, it gets smaller. And I wouldn't really know what they were thinking. So in this sense, when we think of that article we read earlier about teaching up, the child I'm asking them a question, it's a recall question, but I'm still deepening their understanding and allowing them the opportunity to explain how they got to it. So we're not just going to ask that basic question. Then we went all the way down to the reach and the stretch, and so I looked at the opportunities kids would have to analyze, evaluate, and to create that this task allowed. And I came up with a couple of other questions where it said, on Ricky Rabbit's first jump, he landed on 14. On his second jump, he landed on 24. On his third jump, he landed on 34. If he keeps jumping at this rate, where will he land on his 7th jump? I highlighted 7th here because it could have been 10th, it could have been whatever would be appropriate for my classroom. And again, what was the little hook there? How do you know? And then I thought, well, we've asked a lot about jumping, so for the child that's really ready to look deeper at this situation, and the standard that this aligns to is counting by tens, forwards and backwards. Ricky Rabbit wants to join his friend Betty Bunny, so he brought in another bunny on the hip-hop line. Betty Bunny has landed on 36. Ricky is on 16. How many jumps will he need to make to reach his friend? So the structure of the problem changed there. Okay? So when I was planning these questions, I used the Bloom's taxonomy and I looked at the different levels of questions because there's some word samples or some sentence frames that helped me dig a little deeper. So we're going to take another 10 or 15 minutes for you to look at the lesson that you've highlighted or targeted and think about a question. Sometimes this middle question is right in your teacher's manual. And if they provide sample questions for your lesson, look at those first because those might be a really good place for you to launch from. So if you're with your teaching partner, you can work together. If you're by yourself, you and a friend can decide that you can work together as well, or you can do this by yourself. But you have the handout, you have a blank one, and your goal is to think of 3 differentiated questions. Because how we're going to use these in the classroom is I'm going to post all 3 of these questions on a sentence frame. I will pose them to my classroom, and I'm going to let my students select the ones they're going to answer. Because again, thinking to that Common Core classroom, I want to build on background knowledge, I want to focus on the standard I'm teaching, and then I want to give a little reach and a stress. But I want every learner engaged in it so they are actively involved. So go ahead now and get out your tiered questioning, and we'll get started. Is that what the goal is?
Yeah. Well, it's estimating at 10 counting.
So you're going ahead and you're counting them.
Counting by ones and tens. That's the question they used.
So you're going, how many bugs will it take to fill the mat? How do you know? So now we know there's 10 bugs on every mat. And so we've established that. So one of the things is you're going to have them look at the quantity, right? Oh, so here are all these bugs. So I wonder how many more, because by putting I wonder in front of a question, it makes it a little more friendly. Right. I'm wondering how many more mats you think we're going to need to put a bug on every little square here. And that's a little bit kind of, I'm connecting the bugs to the mat. That might add. And then the hard part is what's the reach and a stretch? There's not just one. Absolutely. Yes. And that question can even be broken down to use these 3 digits to create the largest number you have.
And then reshuffle them.
Reshuffle them. Mm-hmm. So then there's multiple aspects.
That's a good idea.
And what's nice about that is there's not a lot of language involved in it. So if you post the circle with the digits, you can use either the greater than, less than symbols. You can just write on it. You can use your vocabulary cards from your word wall. And then you can change it up. And the nice thing about that also is, what if you change the numbers out tomorrow?
Yeah, you can still do the same
even and odd number
strategies.
Too.
Yes, and you can connect them to multiples or to products or to even odd, or depending on where you want to, where your lesson focuses.
That's a good idea.
Great.
The lesson is how many ways can you write the number 5,207? Show each way. So to differentiate to the reach and stretch question would be to use the digits in the circle to create the largest 4-digit number, the smallest 4-digit number, an even number, an odd number. So in the circle there will be 4 digits, and the children have to create those answers with those digits, and then the next day you could switch out, like you suggested, switch out those 4 digits with new digits, and can they still follow those? That's the question.
So she just drew a graphic organizer and put some digits. I think she has a 2, a 5, a 4, and an 8. And had the kids work from that pool or that menu. You could also have them have a deck of cards, draw 4 digit cards, So it could be even greater individualized.
Right, and you could change it to more digits too.
Right, and then you can differentiate your question based on your focus
Right.
of that day or your math practice. Great, thank you for sharing. So one of the things that Mary and I were talking about was how do we take that core question and build on prior background knowledge so all students have access to it, and that we can remind kids where our focus is. And she came up, and these guys were talking, they had some really good strategies, and I think if you'll explain a little bit about your lesson and then what you did, the process you went through.
Okay, well, our lesson is kindergarten, and we are doing a bucket of bugs, and we are going to estimate and then count by ones and by tens to 100. So the question in the adoption in our lesson was, I wonder, how many more mats do you think we will need, and why do you think that?
So one quick key bit of information is these are 10-frame mats.
10-frame mats, so they're going to fill each mat. So to prior that would be how many bugs will it take to fill one mat. So we need to go back and make sure they know how many bugs will it take to fill one mat, how do you know? And then the just right would be how many mats do you think we'll need, and why do you think that? And then to predict for the stretch, predict how many bugs we will have all together, and how do you know? So they would take it from ones to counting by tens or estimating up to 100.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing.